Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Our program today is about something that's in your home right now. It's not something that we think about very often, but it's critical to keeping ourselves and our houses warm. I'm talking about insulation. Well, a new research project at UVM Extension's Center for Sustainable Agriculture is looking at whether Vermont wool can help keep Vermont houses warm. That's right, sheep's wool as insulation. To find out more, I'm joined by Kimberly Hagan and Alex DePillis. Kimberly is part of the research team at UVM, and Alex is a senior agricultural development coordinator with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Thanks so much for coming in. Now, Kimberly, where does the idea of sheep's wool insulation come from, and has it been done before?
It has been done before, but I found out about it when in 2007 I was traveling in France. I had this correspondence with the head of the Sheep Association there. And we had been talking for years about the water quality regulations and how to deal with wastewater after washing wool. And I was very interested in what they were doing over there. She invited me to come and to visit some of the mills, the small mills where they process wool there. And so I went, and we spent some time traveling around to these different mills, and you'll see a picture of one there. And when I was there, I noticed that one of the products they make is insulation. And all these little mills had these big, you'll see the big rolls of bats of insulation that they make, and people use them in their homes.
And so you decided that maybe this could work for Vermont.
I did. I said, well, we can do that too.
So what's the focus of your research on wool insulation?
Well, this is a value-added producer grant, so this is the first phase. And what we'll do this first section is we're going to look at the feasibility. We'll investigate what the supply is here in Vermont and New England and New York State. So how much is produced here of raw product, and what it would cost to, to process that into a product.
Now there is a company that does this in the United States.
Yes, Oregon Shepherd, which we did a small project a few years ago. A homeowner contacted me, and she wanted to try renovating her farmhouse, and she didn't want to use fiberglass, so she wanted to try and use the wool. So we contacted this place, Oregon Shepherd, and she purchased his product, and they piped it into the walls of her house using the cyclone, which is what we use for the cellulose.
And here's a picture of that happening. And so why wool? Is there something special about wool's property that makes it good for insulation?
Well, as we all know, it does keep us warm, when it's cold. But particular types, it can encapsulate a lot of airspace. So we can have, airspace in there, which is part of the insulation, is that. But also, there's this thing called crimp, which different types of wool have more of it than others, and so it has loft, and that helps create that space. And Alex might have something more.
Yeah, what do you know about wool and how that compares performance-wise to traditional insulations?
Well, I think our comparison will probably be with other environmentally friendly materials like cellulose, and it'll have a similar performance to cellulose as an R value. And so I think where it could be different is that people would like to use it, and that it's a value-added product from Vermont. So we'll be really helping Vermont farmers and taking advantage of the Vermont brand to make this a product that really helps us in Vermont, not only using it, but also having the farmers produce the wool and having a good market for it.
And so how does this wool compare to cost-wise to other materials that are used in insulation?
It's a little hard to say yet. It's fairly new as a product here in the United States. It potentially could be less expensive than cellulose to produce because cellulose requires a hammer mill and some other equipment that's pretty expensive to run to chop up the cellulose and puff it up to be a good insulation. Whereas this would not require as much processing. You would need to wash it, which is already done for raw wool, and then some chopping, but not to the extent that you have to have cellulose process. So it could actually be similar or less expensive than cellulose.
Now, Vermont is well known in its history with sheep dating back to the 1800s. Have previous generations of Vermonters used wool as insulation? Do we know?
I don't think we do know. I mean, it's a good question. And I would just assume, I mean, if you ever talk to builders that have renovated old houses, you hear about newspapers and
Right.
old clothes being stuffed into the walls. So I'm sure it had been used.
And so if merino wool is so valuable, why don't we have merino sheep again and use their wool for insulation and other products?
It's a really good question. It's the one I probably get asked the most. The merino, the wool from the merino is very fine and it compacts. It doesn't have the loft. And plus, we can't, it's an animal that doesn't do well in our climate. I know we have a long history with it, but they don't do well here. They don't handle wetness very well. They can handle cold, and that's why they do well in Montana and Australia, where it's very dry. But it's more important, though, is that the wool compacts. It doesn't provide that lofty springiness.
I think you have a product that you want to show us, a sort of a show and tell here on what this product looks like that's manufactured.
So here's an example of the product from the Oregon Shepherd. And as you can see, it's small particles, small pieces. There's a lot of airspace in there. And it doesn't require that it be fancy or fine wool. It's just
Clean.
Just clean. And what we do is we wash it with boric acid, which prevents the insects from wanting to get in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so, and then that can be blown in as traditional is.
Yeah, you just put it in that cyclone that they use for the cellulose and just use the hose and you blow it right into the cavities.
Now, if people are watching this and thinking, I want to do that to my house, could they contact this Oregon company and get the product shipped?
They could. It's been a little hard to find out. I'm not sure if he still is manufacturing this, but there have been 2 other companies that have started up since then.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so how is most wool in Vermont used now? And do farmers make a lot of money from their wool?
No. And there is quite a bit. We did a small study last year, my partner at Extension, Susie Hodgson, and we looked at what the supply, we got a preliminary look with census numbers of how much wool is produced in this area. And from what we can tell, I think that we know that there isn't enough in Vermont. We'd need to go New England and even New York State to collect enough.
And there'd be enough wool, sheep in those states to meet the demand.
Yeah. Or, I mean, we don't know what the demand would be, but we'd find out.
And
It's early days, and I
right.
think it's pretty exciting because right now wool does not get very much money in the market, this low-grade wool, but it could be 4 or 5 times, or 10 times the value once it was washed and prepared as insulation. So for farmers, that's a spread to work with from what you're getting now, 50 cents a pound or less,
Right.
to this finished product maybe being $4 a pound.
But what kind of infrastructure do we need to make that happen?
That's the question, and one of the things we'll be looking at in this research is whether it makes sense to develop a center here for processing, expanding on some of the smaller ones we have, or would it make more sense to use an existing facility, perhaps out west, and have it shipped back?
What about the example that you saw in your travels in Europe as far as a lot of small, companies doing this or facilities doing this? Could that work?
Yeah, I mean, they were not large facilities at all. It makes me think of the Green Mountain Spinnery in Putney. They were somewhere a little bit larger. A couple of them were a little bit larger than that. And most of those places only process at certain times of the year when there's high water flows. And they use a variety of techniques, using plants for cleaning the water. They have holding ponds, lagoons, and then sometimes they take the solids, and because most of it is just the manure that's stuck to the wool and old hay, and they'll just spread it back out on their fields.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
And so is wool more susceptible, though, to mice? You say you wash it in boric acid and that takes care of it, but even the mice?
Well,
I think no matter what you have in your walls, you've got to keep your mice out. And it's that time of year. I don't know about other people, but I've had to chase out some mice
Yes.
in a place that we bought. Finding out where they're getting in and keep them out is the answer. They'll go into fiberglass, they'll go into cellulose, they'll go into wool, they'll go into any nice wall cavity.
They're mice.
Yeah, they're mice. Keep them out. That's right.
So what's next for your research on wool insulation? Where are you now, and where do you want to be, and what's the next step?
well, this feasibility study will take a look at the supply and what makes sense as far as processing, whether to ship out or to develop a processing center here. So those are the first two big steps, and that's going to take a bit of time to figure that out. And then we'll be looking to do some trialing. If it looks like it makes sense, which so far it does, we'll be looking for places to trial some different forms. We're also looking at the idea of not just insulation, but wall panels that can absorb sound, or upholstery.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so, from your standpoint, what do you think the potential is here for Vermont farmers?
I think it's early days, and what I would really love to see is some people step up and say, yes, I want to get involved with this. Yes, I'd like to trial this product. And it's going to be like any early stage market. Those early people are going to be people that have a stake in it already. Maybe they already have some sheep, or they're already in the construction, building, insulation, green products kind of business. And that's where it'll start. And so I think the potential is excellent. I think we're going to see what the uptake is in these early days with this project and in the year or two coming.
Mm-hmm. And so, as far as people who may be watching this and thinking, you know, I could probably use some extra insulation in my house and give you a call, what does it take to be part of the trial?
Getting in touch with us, and just letting us know. I mean, we are interested in finding people who would be interested to trial. I've had a couple of interested people who are building tiny houses.
Really?
That would like to try it, and that's a nice, small, discrete, project where we could really get some good information from trialing it.
That would actually be a perfect fit, really, for the small amount of wool that we're talking about and these projects. Do you think that there's more of an interest in using something that's more organic?
Definitely.
We're seeing more and more interest in the environmentally friendly or green building products, and that's where this would fit. It would be competing with those other green products, not necessarily so much with fiberglass. It'll have similar performance, but it would be a niche product. You'd be able to distinguish yourself as a provider of this material from other people.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, I would think as a homeowner, maybe, the cachet of having something unique to your house.
One of the people on our team is we have an insulation research person on the team, but we also have a builder who is very, very keen. He said that the interest level from people who are building homes or renovating is growing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's somewhere around 7% sort of growing interest rate of trying to see these kind of products, the green products.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Any idea what this is going to cost for folks as far as comparing? A little bit more expensive, could be less expensive?
I think we're here to run those numbers and see what a facility really costs, see what some of the inputs cost, what are we going to pay for wool, what's the end product going to go out the door at. So remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. And what have you heard from farmers about this project?
A lot of excitement. It's pretty hard to make it ends meet with sheep farming in this state. It's not easy. And if we could provide a second revenue stream, whether you're milking or raising sheep for meat, to have another product, to sell, to add to your revenues would be great.
Sheep have to be sheared.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be there. Now it's almost more of an inconvenience than anything else. What can you do with this product?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so traditionally I would think yarn, obviously, but is that pretty much it from sheep?
Yeah, there's some industrial uses for it, but that's pretty small, comparatively. So this would use large volumes.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, it's very exciting. Thanks so much for coming and talking about that.
Yeah,
that's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.